"I'm sorry, ma'am, but your family requested one less chair at the table." Those were the first words I heard on Mother's Day while standing inside the most expensive restaurant in downtown Charleston, wearing a pale blue dress I'd spent 3 weeks saving for. For a moment, I honestly thought the hostess had mistaken me for someone else. I stood there blinking beneath the crystal chandelier, while conversations hummed around me and waiters carried trays of champagne through the dining room. Then I saw my daughter-in-law Vanessa sitting near the window in a cream-colored silk dress, casually stirring her coffee as if she hadn't just erased me from my own family celebration. My son Ryan sat beside her staring at the menu so intensely you'd think it contained the secrets of the universe. Neither of them looked surprised to see me standing there without a seat. "There must be some mistake," I said softly. The hostess looked uncomfortable. "They said the reservation was changed this morning." Vanessa finally looked up then, her smile polished and delicate, like something rehearsed in front of a mirror. "Oh, Evelyn," she said sweetly enough for nearby tables to hear. "I thought Ryan explained it to you. We decided to keep this brunch small. Just immediate mothers who are actively raising children." The sentence landed gently. That was the worst part. She didn't yell. She didn't insult me outright. She simply said it with the calm confidence of someone who believed she had every right to remove me. I felt heat crawl slowly up my neck. Ryan still wouldn't meet my eyes. My own son. The boy whose fevers I sat through at 3 in the morning. The boy I drove 40 miles every Saturday to baseball practice after my husband started working double shifts at the shipyard. The same boy who once cried because he didn't want to leave me for kindergarten now couldn't even offer me a chair at brunch. "I understand," I said quietly. And I did, more than they realized. Because standing there beneath those glittering lights, watching strangers avoid eye contact out of secondhand embarrassment, I suddenly understood that this moment hadn't appeared out of nowhere. Vanessa had been slowly removing me from the family for years. First it was missed birthdays, then forgotten invitations, then holiday plans made without telling me until the last minute. Every time I questioned it, Ryan defended her. "Mom, you're overthinking things. Mom, Vanessa didn't mean it like that. Mom, we've just been busy lately." Busy. Funny how people are always too busy for the ones who love them first. I smiled at the hostess and handed back the gift bag I'd brought for my granddaughter Lily. Inside was the hand-sewn quilt I'd spent 4 months making while my arthritis flared so badly some mornings I could barely hold the needle. Vanessa's eyes flickered toward the bag for half a second before she looked away. I turned and walked toward the exit without another word. No one stopped me. Not Ryan. Not Vanessa. Not even my grandson Caleb, who was too busy playing games on an iPad to notice his grandmother had just been quietly erased from the table. Outside, the Charleston air felt heavy with humidity and the smell of rain drifting in from the harbor. I sat inside my old Buick for nearly 10 minutes staring through the windshield while families walked past carrying flowers and balloons for Mother's Day celebrations. Then my phone rang. I almost ignored it until I saw the caller ID from Ashford Community Bank. "Mrs. Carter," the man on the phone said carefully, "we're calling regarding the refinancing documents submitted for your property last week." My stomach tightened instantly. "What refinancing documents?" I asked. There was a long silence on the line, and in that silence, something inside me began to shift. The rain started just as I pulled into my driveway. Thin gray drops tapped softly against the windshield while the old oak trees lining my street bent in the coastal wind. I sat inside my Buick for a long time with both hands wrapped around the steering wheel, staring at the porch light glowing against the damp afternoon. For 34 years, this house had been the center of every holiday in our family. Christmas mornings, Thanksgiving dinners, birthday cakes cooling on the kitchen counter while children ran through the hallway with sticky fingers and loud laughter. I used to think homes remembered love, that the walls somehow held onto the warmth of the people inside them. But lately the house felt different, quieter, like it already knew I was becoming invisible. I finally stepped out into the rain and carried the untouched gift bag inside. The moment I walked through the front door, the silence settled around me like a heavy blanket. No television, no voices, no footsteps upstairs, just the ticking grandfather clock Harold bought at an estate sale the year Ryan turned 10. I placed the quilt carefully across the dining room chair and removed my damp cardigan. My hand still trembled slightly from the phone call with the bank. Refinancing documents. Submitted last week. The words kept circling in my head like something poisonous. I walked slowly into the kitchen and stared at the framed family photograph hanging beside the pantry door. It was taken 7 years ago in Hilton Head during our last family vacation before Harold got sick. Ryan stood beside me with one arm around my shoulders. Vanessa smiled brightly at the camera, while little Lily sat on my lap, missing her 2 front teeth. Back then I still believed Vanessa liked me, or at least respected me enough to pretend. I poured myself a cup of coffee, even though it was nearly 4 in the afternoon. The first sip had already gone cold before I realized I was standing motionless beside the sink replaying every strange moment from the past 2 years. Vanessa canceling Christmas dinner at the last minute because the children were overtired. Ryan forgetting to invite me to Caleb's school play. Lily whispering once that her mother did not like when she talked about grandma too much at home. At the time, I ignored those moments because that is what mothers do. We smooth over discomfort. We excuse cruelty. We convince ourselves love still exists underneath cold behavior because admitting otherwise feels unbearable. My phone buzzed again on the counter. Ryan. I stared at his name for several seconds before answering. Hey, Mom, he said casually, as if nothing unusual had happened earlier. In the background, I could hear silverware clinking and muffled restaurant music. They were still at brunch. You left pretty fast. I closed my eyes. There was not exactly a reason to stay. Silence stretched between us. Then came the sigh I knew so well. The same sigh he used as a teenager whenever he thought I was being difficult. Mom, Vanessa did not mean anything by it. She just wanted today to be smaller. Smaller. That word almost made me laugh. Ryan, I said quietly, did you submit refinancing paperwork on my house? Everything on the other end of the line went completely silent. No music. No voices. Nothing. Then he cleared his throat softly. Who told you that? My stomach tightened. Not denial. Not confusion. Just fear about how I found out. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table where I had spent years helping him with homework and science projects and college applications. Suddenly, I no longer felt like I was speaking to my son. I felt like I was speaking to a stranger wearing my son's voice. Ryan, I asked carefully, what exactly have you and Vanessa been planning behind my back? Ryan did not answer immediately. I could hear him breathing softly on the other end of the line while restaurant noise drifted faintly in the background. Then Vanessa's voice appeared somewhere near him, low and sharp, asking who he was talking to. My son lowered his voice after that. Mom, it is not what you think. I stared at the rain sliding slowly down my kitchen window. People always say that when it is exactly what you think. Then explain it to me, I said calmly. Because a man from the bank just called asking why my house is being refinanced without my knowledge. Another pause. Longer this time. I heard a chair scrape against the floor and muffled footsteps. Ryan was moving somewhere private. We were going to tell you, he finally said. Vanessa and I have been discussing options for the future. Future. Such a clean, harmless word for something that suddenly felt ugly. What kind of options? I asked. Mom, this house is a lot for you to manage alone now. The stairs, the maintenance, the property taxes keep going up every year. I almost smiled at how carefully rehearsed he sounded, like someone repeating lines from a conversation practiced many times before. And where exactly was I supposed to go while you refinance my home? His voice tightened slightly. We found a really nice retirement community outside Savannah. It has walking trails and social events and transportation services. I closed my eyes for a moment. Retirement community. There it was. The real plan finally stepping into the light. Not because they cared about my health. Not because they worried about me being lonely. They wanted the house. The same house Harold and I spent 3 decades paying off. The same house where every birthday candle and Christmas morning still lived quietly inside the walls. Did Vanessa come up with this idea? I asked softly. Ryan exhaled heavily. Mom, stop making her the villain. I looked around my kitchen then. At the faded yellow curtains I sewed myself 20 years earlier. At Harold's coffee mug still sitting beside the stove because I could not bring myself to move it. At the small crack in the ceiling above the pantry Ryan made while throwing a baseball indoors at age 12. Every inch of this house carried pieces of our family history. But suddenly I realized something painful. To me, those memories were sacred. To Ryan and Vanessa, this place was just property value. You should have talked to me first, I said quietly. We were trying to help, he replied quickly. Vanessa thought if we refinanced the house, we could renovate it and eventually move in here ourselves. Then you would not have to worry about expenses anymore. Eventually move in here ourselves. The sentence settled heavily inside my chest. They had already imagined their future in my home while quietly planning mine somewhere else. I pressed my fingers against my temple as a dull ache began forming behind my eyes. Ryan, I asked carefully, did you already sign paperwork? Silence answered me again. Then came the truth in pieces. They had met with the bank twice. Vanessa had spoken to a realtor. There were discussions about converting the downstairs study into a nursery. My study. The room where Harold spent his final weeks reading quietly beside the window overlooking the garden. Mom, Ryan said. Suddenly, his voice softer now, almost pleading, you are making this sound worse than it is. Worse than it is. I looked down at my wedding ring resting beside the sink, where I placed it every evening before bed. Harold used to tell me that betrayal rarely arrives loudly. Real betrayal slips quietly into your life, disguised as concern. Did you know, I asked slowly, that today was the first Mother's Day in 42 years that I spent alone? Ryan did not answer, because somewhere deep down, he knew exactly what he had become. After Ryan hung up, the house became painfully quiet again. I stood in the kitchen for several minutes, staring at the dark reflection of myself in the window above the sink. At 68 years old, I suddenly felt much older. Not because of my body, because of the exhaustion that comes when someone you love forces you to see them clearly for the first time. Outside, the rain continued falling steadily across the backyard Harold used to care for every Saturday morning. He loved that yard, especially the hydrangeas along the fence line. Even during chemotherapy, he still insisted on watering them himself. I remember standing on the porch one evening 3 summers ago while he trimmed dead branches with slow, careful movements, his hands thinner than they used to be. Promise me something, he said without looking up. If people ever stop treating you with kindness after I am gone, do not confuse that with love. At the time I thought he was talking about grief, about how uncomfortable people become around widows. I never imagined he was talking about our own son. I carried my cold coffee into the living room and sat beside the fireplace where Harold and I spent most evenings after retirement. The room still smelled faintly like cedarwood and old books. His reading glasses remained on the side table exactly where he left them 18 months earlier. Everyone told me I should move on after he passed. Remove his things. Redecorate. Downsize. But I could never bring myself to erase him from this house. It was the last place in the world where I still felt close to him. My eyes drifted toward the hallway leading to the downstairs study. Vanessa had called it an unused space during Thanksgiving last year. I remember the way her eyes moved around the room while she spoke, measuring walls and windows like someone mentally redesigning a property they already owned. A nursery would fit perfectly in there someday, she said casually while cutting pie at the kitchen counter. Ryan smiled at her then. Neither of them noticed the way Harold quietly lowered his fork. He was already sick by that point, too weak to argue. But later that night, after everyone left, he sat silently in his recliner for almost an hour before finally saying, Vanessa sees assets before she sees people. I defended her back then. God help me, I actually defended her. I told him she was ambitious, organized, practical. I convinced myself her coldness was simply confidence because the alternative was admitting my son had married someone who viewed family like a business arrangement. My phone buzzed softly against the coffee table, pulling me back to the present. A text message from Lily. My chest tightened immediately. Vanessa rarely allowed the children to contact me directly anymore. The message was short. Grandma, are you okay? Mom seemed mad after brunch. I stared at the screen for several seconds before typing back carefully. I am fine, sweetheart. Did you have a nice Mother's Day? 3 little dots appeared almost instantly, then disappeared, then returned again. Finally, her response came through. Grandma, I did not know you were not invited. I thought you said no. I felt something cold settle deep inside me. Vanessa had lied to the children too, not just excluded me, rewritten the story entirely so I would appear responsible for my own absence. I leaned back slowly against the couch cushions and closed my eyes. That was when another memory surfaced. Last Christmas, Lily gave me a handmade ornament shaped like a heart during dinner. Vanessa laughed softly and said, Careful, Lily. Grandma already has enough clutter in that old house. Everyone chuckled politely except Harold. He simply watched Vanessa with the saddest expression I had ever seen on his face. At the time I thought he was tired from treatment. Now I realized something else entirely. Harold saw this coming long before I did. And suddenly, I remembered the sealed envelope still sitting unopened inside the cedar chest upstairs. The cedar chest sat at the foot of my bed exactly where Harold left it. The brass corners were worn from age, and the wood carried the faint scent of tobacco and cedar oil that always reminded me of him. For years I barely opened it except to store old photographs and Christmas cards from the grandchildren. But that night, after Lily's message and Ryan's phone call, I walked upstairs slowly and knelt beside it with trembling hands. Rain tapped softly against the bedroom windows, while thunder rolled somewhere far beyond the harbor. The entire house felt suspended in silence. I lifted the lid carefully. Inside were old family albums, Harold's Navy service medals, and beneath them all, the cream-colored envelope I suddenly could not stop thinking about. My name was written across the front in Harold's handwriting. For Evelyn. Only if you ever need it. My chest tightened as I slid one finger beneath the seal. Harold had written the letter 6 months before he died. I recognized the shakier penmanship immediately. If you are reading this, the letter began, then something has changed in our family the way I feared it might. I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed and kept reading while the storm darkened outside. Harold wrote about Vanessa first. Not cruelly. That was never his way. But honestly, he described the little things he noticed during his illness. The way Vanessa asked detailed questions about the house value after every hospital appointment. The way she encouraged Ryan to discuss future planning more aggressively once doctors confirmed the cancer had spread. The way she stopped speaking warmly to him once she realized he was too weak to challenge her directly anymore. My throat tightened painfully as I read each line. Harold saw everything. Every cold glance. Every calculated smile. Every quiet manipulation I had spent years excusing away. Ryan loves too deeply to recognize when someone is using his loyalty against him, Harold wrote. That is why I made certain legal arrangements without telling either of them. I stared at those words for a long moment before unfolding the second document inside the envelope. It was a copy of an irrevocable family trust. My eyes moved slowly across the pages while my heartbeat pounded harder with every line. The house was protected entirely under the trust. Not Ryan. Not Vanessa. Me. Harold had transferred ownership 18 months before his death. There was more. A clause buried near the end stopped me cold. If any beneficiary attempted to pressure, remove, manipulate, or financially coerce me regarding my residence, they would immediately lose all inheritance rights connected to the trust. I covered my mouth with one hand. Harold knew. Somehow he knew exactly what would happen after he was gone. Tears finally blurred my vision then. But they were not the helpless tears I cried at his funeral. These felt different, sharper, colder, like grief finally mixing with understanding. Suddenly dozens of strange memories snapped into place. Vanessa encouraging Harold to simplify paperwork during chemotherapy. Ryan insisting we discuss long-term living arrangements barely 3 weeks after the funeral. Vanessa repeatedly asking where Harold kept important legal documents. They thought they were preparing quietly for the future. But Harold had already prepared for them. My eyes drifted toward the framed photograph on my nightstand. It was taken 30 years ago at Folly Beach. Ryan was 12, sunburned, and grinning with missing front teeth, while Harold held me close beside the ocean. Back then our family still felt solid. Safe. Real. I reached for the edge of the mattress to steady myself as another painful realization settled over me. The person who protected me most was not my son. It was the husband Vanessa considered weak and dying. My phone buzzed again downstairs, faint against the storm. Another message. I wiped my eyes quickly and walked toward the staircase. But halfway down the hallway, I froze. The security camera alert on my phone showed headlights slowly pulling into my driveway. Ryan's truck. And judging by the passenger door opening beside him, Vanessa had come too. For a moment I remained completely still in the upstairs hallway, staring at the security camera alert glowing against my phone screen. Rainwater shimmered across the driveway while Ryan's truck idled beneath the oak trees. Vanessa stepped out first, pulling her beige trench coat tighter around herself as thunder rumbled overhead. Even through the grainy camera footage, I could recognize the impatient way she crossed her arms while waiting for Ryan to come around the front of the truck. They had not come to apologize. Something inside me knew that immediately. I slipped Harold's letter back into the envelope and carried both documents downstairs carefully, almost reverently, before locking them inside the small desk drawer in the study. My hands no longer trembled the way they had earlier. Strange how clarity can calm a person. When the doorbell rang, I took a slow breath and opened the front door myself. Ryan looked exhausted. Vanessa looked irritated. Water dripped from the ends of her perfectly styled blonde hair as she stepped inside, without waiting to be invited. "We needed to talk," she said quickly, already glancing around the living room as though checking for signs of what I knew. Fear rarely announces itself loudly. Sometimes it enters a room disguised as confidence moving too fast. Ryan closed the door behind him quietly. "Mom," he began carefully, "the bank was not supposed to contact you yet." Yet, another revealing little word. I removed my damp reading glasses slowly and placed them on the hallway table. That implies there was a correct time for me to discover my home was being refinanced behind my back. Vanessa sighed softly, the kind of sigh people use when they believe someone else is being unreasonable. "Evelyn, no one is trying to hurt you. We are trying to plan responsibly." "Responsibly," I repeated. "Is that what we are calling it now?" Her jaw tightened slightly. Ryan stepped forward then, lowering his voice like he used to whenever he wanted me to calm down as a child. "Mom, please. We were going to explain everything after we finalized some details." I looked at him carefully beneath the warm glow of the hallway light. For the first time, I noticed how much of Vanessa's language had become his own. Details, planning, options, future arrangements. Cold, practical words that stripped emotion away from betrayal until it almost sounded reasonable. Almost. "Did either of you ever consider asking me what I wanted?" I asked quietly. Vanessa crossed her arms tighter. "You are 68 years old, Evelyn. This house is too much for one person." "Interesting," I replied softly. "Because maintaining it alone never seemed to concern you until Harold died." The silence that followed sharpened instantly. Ryan looked down at the hardwood floor. Vanessa's eyes narrowed just slightly before smoothing over again. There it was, that tiny crack beneath the polished surface. "This is not about Harold," she said. "No," I answered. "I think it is exactly about Harold." Rain battered the windows harder outside, while the grandfather clock ticked steadily behind us. For several long seconds no one spoke. Then Vanessa did something that finally made everything clear. She glanced toward the staircase leading upstairs and asked casually, "Have you found any of Harold's legal paperwork yet?" Not grief, not concern, not guilt. Paperwork. My chest went strangely cold. "Why?" I asked carefully. "Should I have?" Ryan immediately looked uncomfortable. "Vanessa," he muttered quietly. But she ignored him. "We just know Harold handled most of the finances before he passed," she said smoothly. "It would help everyone if we understood what assets still need organizing." Assets. There was that word again. Not memories. Not family. Assets. I suddenly remembered Harold sitting silently beside the fireplace last winter while Vanessa talked for nearly 20 minutes about rising Charleston property values. At one point, she even joked that people would kill for a house in this neighborhood. Harold never laughed. Now I understood why. I folded my hands calmly in front of me and studied the two people standing in my living room. One was the son I raised. The other was the woman who spent years teaching him how to see me as an obstacle instead of a mother. And somewhere deep beneath the grief and disappointment, something else began taking shape. Inside me. Not panic. Not sadness. Resolve. Vanessa was the first to sit down, as though this were already her house, and we were simply discussing renovations over coffee. She placed her designer handbag neatly beside Harold's old recliner and folded her hands together with practiced composure. Ryan remained standing near the fireplace, restless and pale beneath the warm lamplight. I could see the strain beginning to crack through him now. Guilt has a way of exhausting people when they spend too long pretending they're doing the right thing. I stayed near the hallway table for a moment, studying them quietly while rainwater slid down the windows behind us. Then I walked into the kitchen and poured 3 cups of coffee without asking if they wanted any. Habit is a strange thing. Even after betrayal, part of me still moved like a mother. When I returned, Vanessa immediately began speaking again. "Evelyn, nobody wants conflict here," she said smoothly. "We are trying to think long-term. Ryan and I have children to consider." Children. She always used the children whenever she wanted to sound morally untouchable. I handed Ryan his coffee first. He looked surprised by the gesture. Vanessa accepted hers without thanking me. You already have a home, I replied calmly. A very large one, if I remember correctly. Vanessa smiled faintly. The market is changing. This neighborhood is better for the children's future. There it was again. Future. Every sentence wrapped neatly around money without openly mentioning it. Ryan finally sat down then, rubbing one hand across his forehead. Mom, can we just have an honest conversation? I looked at him carefully. I have been honest this entire time. His shoulders sagged slightly. That is not fair. I almost laughed at that. Fairness. Interesting word coming from the man who allowed his mother to arrive at a restaurant with no chair waiting for her. Do you know what fairness would have looked like? I asked quietly. You knocking on this front door months ago and saying, Mom, we are struggling financially and wondering if you would ever consider helping us. That would have been honest. Neither of them answered. Because honesty was never part of the plan. Vanessa glanced toward Ryan before speaking more carefully. This is not only about money. No. I asked softly. Then why was the bank preparing paperwork without my signature? Ryan shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa remained perfectly composed. We thought eventually you would agree once you saw the benefits. Benefits? I stared at her for several seconds. Then suddenly I saw the entire pattern clearly. Vanessa never viewed people emotionally. She viewed them strategically. Every relationship in her life existed according to usefulness. Connections. Assets. Opportunities. Even motherhood itself often felt more performative than heartfelt with her. Perfect family photographs online. Coordinated holiday outfits. Expensive birthday parties for the children. Yet somehow Lily still whispered to me in secret because she felt lonely inside her own house. Did you tell the children I chose not to attend brunch today? I asked suddenly. Vanessa blinked once. Just once. But it was enough. I did not want them caught in adult tension, she replied carefully. Ryan looked confused. What are you talking about? I watched him closely then. The confusion on his face appeared genuine, which meant Vanessa had lied separately to him too. Interesting. Lily texted me. I said quietly. She believed I declined the invitation myself. Ryan slowly turned toward his wife. Vanessa's posture stiffened almost invisibly. I simplified things for the children, she said quickly. There was no reason to upset them. The room fell silent again except for the ticking grandfather clock and distant thunder outside. Ryan stared down into his coffee cup without speaking. I could almost see the first tiny fractures beginning inside him now. Not enough to break free from Vanessa. Not yet, but enough to make him uncomfortable. Vanessa noticed it too. She reached for his hand immediately, fingers wrapping gently around his wrist. Ryan, she said softly, your mother is twisting this into something ugly. Twisting. Another careful word. Everything with Vanessa came wrapped in softer language, so the cruelty underneath remained hidden. But for the first time in years, I was no longer listening to her words. I was watching her intentions. And once you finally see someone clearly, it becomes impossible to unsee them. The storm outside began easing into a steady drizzle, but inside the living room the tension only thickened. Vanessa kept one hand lightly around Ryan's wrist, like she was afraid silence itself might pull him away from her. I sat across from them in Harold's old armchair, studying the two people who had spent months planning my future without ever truly speaking to me. Strange how quickly a family can start feeling like strangers once money enters the room. I think we should all calm down, Vanessa said finally, her voice smooth and controlled again. Nobody is trying to take anything from you. I looked at her for a moment before answering. Then why was my home discussed with bankers and realtors before it was discussed with me? Ryan exhaled heavily. Mom, we were trying to avoid stressing you out. You mean you were trying to avoid hearing no? The words landed quietly between us. Ryan lowered his eyes immediately. Vanessa did not. She simply tilted her head slightly, studying me with that same measured expression she used whenever she thought someone was becoming inconvenient. Evelyn, she said carefully, with all respect, this house is eventually going to belong to Ryan anyway. We were trying to prepare responsibly for the future of the family. Eventually. That word lingered in the room long after she spoke it. Not if, not maybe. Eventually. As though my absence from this home was already an accepted fact waiting for the correct paperwork. I suddenly remembered the afternoon Harold signed the trust documents. At the time he only told me it was routine estate planning. Afterwards, we sat together on the back porch drinking iced tea while cicadas hummed through the summer heat. He looked tired that day, older than usual, but I remember one sentence very clearly now. Some people only show their true character once they think the finish line is close. I did not understand him then. I understood him perfectly now. Vanessa stood up suddenly and walked toward the fireplace, examining the framed family photographs lined across the mantel. Her fingers hovered briefly near the silver wedding picture from Ryan and her ceremony in Charleston. "This house would really be perfect for the children," she said softly, almost to herself. "The schools here are excellent." I watched Ryan carefully when she said that. He nodded automatically, not because he fully agreed, because he had spent years learning to move in rhythm with her opinions. "Do the children even want to spend time here?" I asked quietly. Vanessa turned toward me. "Of course they do." "Interesting," I replied, because Lily seemed surprised today when she discovered I was not invited to brunch. Ryan looked up immediately. "What exactly did Lily say to you?" Vanessa answered before I could. "Ryan, she is a child. She probably misunderstood." But now I noticed something important. Vanessa was no longer calm. Tiny cracks had begun appearing beneath her polished composure. Her shoulders felt tighter. Her smile arrived half a second too late. People lose control in small ways long before they lose it completely. Ryan rubbed his forehead again, exhaustion spreading visibly across his face. "Maybe we should slow down for tonight," he muttered quietly. Vanessa's head snapped toward him so quickly the movement almost startled me. "Slow down?" she repeated. "Ryan, we already started the refinancing process." The room went completely still. Ryan blinked at her. I watched realization begin forming slowly behind his eyes. She had said too much. "Started?" he asked carefully. Vanessa froze for one brief second before correcting herself. "I meant preliminary discussions." But it was too late. Even Ryan heard the difference. My son slowly turned toward me then, confusion and discomfort battling across his face. For the first time all evening, he looked less like Vanessa's partner and more like the uncertain boy I once raised. "Mom," he said quietly, "did Dad ever mention changing anything legally before he died?" There it was. The question they truly came here to ask. Not about my feelings. Not about reconciliation. Harold. The paperwork. The house. I folded my hands calmly in my lap while rainwater dripped softly from the gutters outside. Then I looked directly at Vanessa and answered with complete honesty. "As a matter of fact," I said quietly, "your father did leave something behind." The moment I said those words, the entire room changed. Vanessa's expression tightened almost instantly, though she tried to hide it behind a careful smile. Ryan looked caught somewhere between confusion and dread. Outside, the rain had softened into a faint mist that blurred the streetlights beyond the windows. But inside the living room, every small sound suddenly felt sharper. The ticking grandfather clock, the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, Vanessa setting her untouched coffee cup down too carefully on the table beside her. "What exactly did Dad leave?" Ryan asked quietly. I studied him for a moment before answering. In another life, years ago, I probably would have rushed to comfort him. I would have softened my tone, protected his feelings. Mothers spend decades cushioning their children from consequences. But sitting there beneath Harold's old reading lamp, watching the woman beside my son mentally calculate legal possibilities behind her polished expression, I realized something painful. Protecting Ryan from discomfort was partly how we ended up here in the first place. "Your father left instructions," I said calmly. Vanessa leaned forward slightly. Not emotionally. Strategically. "Instructions regarding what?" I looked directly at her. "Regarding this house. Regarding me. Regarding what happens if anyone attempts to pressure me into leaving my home." For the first time all evening, Vanessa's composure slipped completely. Only for a second. But I saw it. Ryan saw it too. "Pressure you," Ryan repeated slowly. "Mom, nobody is pressuring you." "No," I asked softly. "Then what would you call secretly contacting banks and realtors while discussing retirement facilities behind my back?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Because there was no good answer. Vanessa recovered quickly, crossing one leg neatly over the other. "Evelyn, I think this is becoming unnecessarily dramatic." Dramatic. Another favorite word people use whenever older women finally stop accepting disrespect. Quietly, I stood up slowly from Harold's chair and walked toward the study doorway. Neither of them moved. They watched me in silence as I unlocked the desk drawer and removed the cream-colored envelope Harold left behind. Even now, holding it in my hands made my chest ache. Not because of fear anymore, because of love. The kind of love that protects you even after death. I returned to the living room and placed the envelope carefully on the coffee table between us. Ryan stared at his father's handwriting with visible emotion flickering across his face. Vanessa stared at it like a locked vault. Your father created an irrevocable trust before he died, I said quietly. Ryan blinked in confusion. Vanessa went completely still. The house belongs to the trust, I continued. Not to me directly. Not to you. And certainly not to anyone planning renovations before I am even gone. Vanessa's face lost color slowly. That does not make sense, she said immediately. Ryan is the beneficiary. He was, I replied calmly, unless certain conditions were violated. Silence crashed heavily into the room. Ryan looked between us now, panic beginning to creep visibly into his expression. What conditions? He asked. I unfolded the final page carefully and read Harold's words exactly as written. Any beneficiary who attempts to manipulate, pressure, financially coerce, or remove Evelyn Carter from her primary residence shall immediately forfeit all inheritance rights connected to the family trust. Ryan stared at me as if the floor beneath him had suddenly disappeared. Vanessa spoke first. That is ridiculous. But her voice sounded thinner now, less certain. Your father anticipated exactly this situation, I said softly. Long before I did. Ryan slowly lowered his head into his hands. I watched the realization settle over him piece by piece. Every conversation, every meeting with the bank, every hidden discussion with Vanessa. His father had seen it coming before any of us. Vanessa stood abruptly from the couch. This is emotional manipulation, she snapped. Harold was sick when he signed this. But even she did not fully believe her own argument anymore. Because deep down, she knew something terrible. Harold understood her perfectly. I looked at the two of them standing in my living room beneath family photographs that suddenly felt almost ironic now. Then I spoke the quietest truth of all. The saddest part is that none of this had to happen. I would have helped you willingly if you had simply treated me like family instead of an obstacle. Ryan looked up at me then with tears gathering in his eyes for the first time that night. But Vanessa did not look sad. She looked angry. And in that moment, my son finally saw the difference.